Hi, my name is Dr. Traci Ferguson. I am a physical therapist with Sugarfoot Therapy. I work in Los Angeles, which gives me the opportunity to work with competitive dancers and professional dancers. I myself grew up as a dancer, so I absolutely love this, and being able to share my both worlds with you is what I'm here for. Today, I'm going to share with you my top 10 exercises for contemporary dancers. Okay, so for our first two exercises, I would put these in a warm-up category. These are important because it helps get the heart rate up, gets the body warm, starts making that tissue more extensible. So these are great replacements for our standard stretches that we do in dance. So our first one that I want to show you is our deep squat with lifts. These are great hip openers that are going to get you a lot of mobility in your hips. So you're going to lower down into a wide second position. In this position, you want to push your arms out into your knees and your knees into the arms. It's going to create just a nice pressure and activate all of the muscles here. Once you hold this, I want you to lift up. You go a slow count of 2 on the way up and then a slow count of 2 on the way down. With this, it's really important to make that contact stay within the knees and keep everything nice and active. You want your back nice and flat on the hip lift up, and then also slow and control the way down. And you can go as deep into a squat as you can control without just sinking in and hanging out on those joint capsules and ligaments. So it's nice and active the whole time. Good. When you come out of this one, it's hard to just stand right up, so it's important you can place your hands on the ground, lift your hips up and then come on up. This one you can do 2 sets of if you feel like you need a little bit more opening in the hips, but about 5 to 10 repetitions per set. So our second exercise is our sliding splits. So this is a great alternative to hanging out and just sitting in a passive split position. This one really works on control. So we're going to be sliding out into our split, and the first round you'll see Katie stopping at different points. This is to show the muscles how to contract and activate. That way it can kind of work like brakes on the car on the way down. So they'll make sure you're nice and stable when you're doing your leaps, jumps, spot mods, kind of everything that is in that split position. So you're going to start kneeling with one foot. And in this position here, you'll see she has a little mat just to help her slide. But what I'll have you do is just going to start to shift your weight forward, sliding into that front leg, into that split position. You're going to hold. Then you're going to go down about another inch or two and hold. So you're going to progress this all the way down, every couple inches of movement, just squeezing those legs together to make yourself stop, and then to continue the movement down. Good. You want to go as far down in the split as you can stop it and control. Good. And then when you get to the bottom, you can kind of work yourself out of it and then reset back in the starting position. Okay. And for this second repetition, this one is going to be a little bit harder. So if you had a challenge with that first repetition, continue to do the same type of motion. So for this one, you're going to get into that half kneeling position with the leg kicked out. And the difference here is we're going to slide fully out into the split and then pull it back as far or back to the starting position. When you slide out, only go as far as you can control it and as far as you can pull back without arching through the low back to come up or using your momentum. So this is all coming from just like that squeeze of the hip flexor and the hamstrings on the way out. So that control lowering down and that squeeze together to come all the way back up to start. For this one, it's one you want to perform on both legs, and you can do about 5 repetitions of it just to get that opening and that elongation of the muscles. Great. So it's important for us to work our upper bodies. Oftentimes, dancers, we really focus on the lower half, which is definitely important because it is a lot of times where we get hurt and where a lot of our movement comes from, especially in contemporary, have floor work. And with floor work, it's really important that we can support and transition through our upper extremity and find that stability from our core. So it's very important to give equal attention to the upper body as well. You'll see us in a few of these exercises also working through 3 planes of movement. So these 3 planes are going to be our sagittal plane, which is a forward and backwards movement, frontal plane, which is side to side, and then our transverse plane, which is rotational. It's important that we address these 3 planes when we're doing exercises because we are 3D beings and dance is 3D, so we have to practice and train in all different directions. For our third exercise, we're going to do some core and also a little bit of upper extremity stability. So with this, we're going to get into a plank position, and we're going to do what we call a three-way plank with a hip driver. So what hip drivers mean, it just means your hips are going to initiate the movement. So go ahead and get into a high plank. So hands and wrists are straight underneath your shoulders, as you can see with Katie. And then she's a straight line all the way down to the heels, and she's pushing energetically out through those heels. One thing to note for form here, she's going to be actively pushing away from the floor. Sometimes you can sink into their shoulder blades like this without much muscle activity. So you're going to push as far as you can away from the floor, keeping that nice straight line. And then from this position, we're going to go through 3 planes of movement. Our first one is the sagittal plane. We're going to be moving forwards and backwards here. So she's going to be lifting her hips high up and then going down past the plank as well. So it's that transition through these 2 points. The important thing to note is there isn't any arching or bending at her back. It's staying almost as if she has a rod through the spine the whole time. And it's that active push through the hands throughout this full plane of movement. Good, and we're going to find our center position back in our tall plank. Here we're going to move through the frontal plane next. So our frontal plane is going to be side to side. And with this, you want to just shift your body weight from one arm to the other, keeping everything nice and level. So you don't want it to start to look like a rainbow. You want to just slide smoothly across. Good, keeping that active push away from the floor. And then we'll recenter back in that high plank. And then we'll do our third plane of movement, which is going to be a rotational plane or our transverse plane. So this one, we're going to be dropping one hip down and then come back up and then transitioning to the other side. Good. Again, keeping that active push away from the floor and keeping that nice straight spine. Good. So with these, you can do about 8 to 10 repetitions in each plane of movement and going about 1 to 2 sets of that depending on the amount of time you have. So our fourth exercise, we are going to do a shoulder stability movement here. So this one we call prone A's, T's, and Y's. So we're going to transition through these 3 different positions, and we're going to be working a lot of the muscles in our back and near our shoulder blade. So with this, you want to lay on your stomachs. You're going to push your forehead down into the floor. This will activate and support the neck. And then you're going to have that pelvic tuck under the floor to activate your core. So we're nice and stable in the center of our body. Our arms are going to start low like an A. And from here, we're going to lift our arms up, really squeezing from the shoulder blades. And you're going to transition your arms out to about a 90-degree angle like a T and set them back down onto the floor. And from here, you're going to lift up again. And we're going to transition them up as in a Y and then lift them down. And then we're going to reverse. So we're going to go up and back down, and then down to our A at that 45 angle and down. So with this, it's important to watch the shrugging of the shoulders, keep that space nice and open, especially as we transition up into the Y. It's really common to come up in here and to get a little too much activity from our upper trap. So we're focusing on that mid and lower trap for these exercises. And for this one, doing about 5 to 8 repetitions is perfect. You're going to get good shoulder mobility, really activate all the muscles that are going to keep us nice, strong, and stable so we can use our arms for reaching or supporting ourselves on the floor. Good. For our fifth exercise, we're going to be doing a banded overhead reach. So with this one, you want to grab a light mini band. This doesn't need too much resistance. And if you don't have a mini band, a TheraBand works great for this as well, either into the light, or medium levels. So with this, you're going to put that band about at a watch spot on the forearm. You're going to push out into the band, keeping that tension, and you're going to start to reach up overhead, and you want to move as high as you can without readjusting the shoulder blades. So it's, again, very important to keep that space nice and wide between the shoulder blades and the ears. This one is a great activator for those upward rotators of our shoulder blades, which help us transition and move on the floor and also reach. It activates our rotator cuff, which is very important for stabilization for our shoulder. This is a nice, easy exercise to go into. It definitely makes those muscles talk to you very quick, so about 5 to 6 repetitions of this one, and you'll feel like your shoulders are awake and ready to go. This one, a compensation we might see as you start to get up, not only might you reach your shoulders up, but there's a certain tendency to overarch the back and to let the ribs flare. So it's very important to keep the ribs down, almost in line with the hip bones. So you want to think of something just cinching those together, maintaining that core activity and that just full pressure and activation in the body as you reach up and overhead. So your whole body is working to contribute to that push and that reach. Yes. For our sixth exercise, we're going to shift down into our lower extremities and work on some pelvic stability. So for this one, we're going to do what we call our standing clams. Medium band, and we're going to be putting it above the knees. This one, we're working mostly on our glute med. This is a muscle on the side of our hip that is very big for pelvic stability. It is super important for standing on one leg, so turning, any sort of balance that you need to do. This is your feet slightly wider than hip width distance. I'm going to have you sit back into a mini squat, so a slight hip hinge here, and you want to think about your hips going back. Dancers, we tend to be very forward, so it's important to really think about the hips shifting backwards the whole time, so the knees don't go any further forward than what would be like your shoelaces. And so from here, what we're going to do is you're going to drop one knee in and kind of resist the band on the way in, and then you're going to push the knee out. And with this one, you're going to pass that midline and push a little out, but you don't want your foot to roll open. So keep the ball of the foot firmly planted on the floor the whole time. And you're just going to transition between those two positions, that inward and outward push, and you're activating that moving side. So with this one, we can do about 5 to 8 repetitions on one side, and then we're going to transition into the other leg. Your core is nice and active. This is another one you want to watch that rib placement and make sure it's tucked in and in line with your hip bones. Only thing moving here is going to be your knee. So once we do our repetitions on each side, we can take a slightly wider stance. So readjust your feet, and then you're going to shift all of your weight over to one side, leaving that trailing leg nice and straight. And this again is with the hips backwards to really focus on glute activation over quads. So we're going to take the knee on the side we shifted towards, and this will now be our moving leg. Good. Watching on this one, especially with the wider stance, your hip's going to want to drop on the side that we're shifted towards. So making sure everything stays nice and even throughout the movement. Then we'll switch sides. Same thing as you transition, hips stay level, and you'll get a nice burn in the outer hips. Good. So our seventh exercise is going to be a hip airplane. This one's really important for trunk control. It focuses a lot on core activation, and it kind of helps us stay out of our lower back. But the most important is teaching our body how to rotate and initiate from our hips. So this is going to be very important with turns, with any transitional movement from a single leg to double leg or double leg to single leg. So this we will use all the time when dancing. So to start off with this one, you're going to be getting into a parallel arabesque or like a warrior 3 stance. Arms can be out to the side, whatever feels comfortable for you. They can be at the hips to try to feel for that motion, or they can be in front in like a first position, whatever is comfortable for you. And for I like hips personally. We're going to rotate. So you'll start by rotating up and open, keeping your stance knee pointing straight the whole time. And then you're going to come back to a parallel position to the floor. And then we're going to go in the opposite direction, and we're going to turn inwards. So it's very important to keep, again, those ribs down, cores active, and we're rotating our pelvis around our stance leg. Good. This one takes a lot of time and control. Often people will start to lead with the shoulders. You really want to focus on this only coming from the hips and not translating down into the knee. Good. And this one you want to do on both sides. About 8 repetitions of this one will get you that good neuromuscular control and really wake up all of those muscles around that hip joint. So again, it's creating stability while also increasing your mobility as well. Beautiful. For our 8th exercise, we're going to be doing an ankle inversion, eversion, and releve. So those are pretty fancy terms for like a roll out and a roll in, almost like that like beveled sickle position. This one's very important because the most commonly injured spot in dancers are our ankles. So we want to make sure we protect that ankle joint. What this exercise will do is not only are we kind of getting the strength that we want in a releve, we're also giving our body a plan. So it knows what to do if in case we roll out, it knows how to effectively pull ourselves in. So for this exercise, we have a light band at the ankles, kind of right at the sock line. And we don't need a heavy band here because again, it's just for a little bit of a cue on our range of motion. So you're going to rise up into a releve in parallel. You're going to keep your weight over your second toe, and we'll start by shifting way out, almost as if your weight's going over your pinky toe. Go as far as you can without pain, and then you're going to bring the legs back up into a center position, almost like pulling and resisting the band. Once we find a point, we're going to shift our weight over our big toes. So we're going to go the opposite direction, almost pushing, kind of guiding the band in. And we're going to transition through those two positions. So with this, that nice and smooth out, and then that find back into center, so that pull up and in, and then that shift up and over the big toe as well. So with this one, check where your stability is. It doesn't need to be in your highest releve. It can be lower if this is new and it's something you're not quite used to. And so once you get more accustomed to it and a bit more stable, you can rise into a higher releve. For this one, repetitions, you can do, it kind of depends on how your balance is feeling that day, but I like this one into like the 8 to 12 range because it's a bit more of an endurance neuromuscular activator. So it's activating all those muscles around that ankle joint. Great. Okay, so our last two exercises we're going to do are going to focus on jumps. So our 9th exercise is going to be what we call snap downs. It's really just a way to teach your body how to land a jump because it's very important to be able to land a jump if we're doing a big trick because more often than not, injuries occur in the landing, not in the takeoff. So with this exercise, you're going to start by going up into a releve and kind of bringing yourself up as if you're going to be high. So think of that lift up out of the feet, and then you're quickly going to snap down. Good. So you kind of want to feel like you're landing the biggest jump that you have in that active, quick down. With this one, you can see Katie has a band just above the knees. We're using this as a cue. So she has to actively push her knees out into that band to get that glute med and pelvic stability and that knee stability while landing. Good. So with this one, this is our base level, but this could be as far as you go if it's already wobbly. We can do about 8 to 10 repetitions of this until you feel like you have the mechanics down. You really want to send the hips back on your landing so you're not upright. So again, we're using that hip control and those glutes. If this is looking stable for you, we can go one step harder. So what we'll do, we're going to go what we call a 2 to 1. So we're going to go up on 2 legs and then snap down into 1. Again, both knees are still driving out into that band to watch for that knee drop inwards. So up and snap, exactly. So this one, if the first one is good for you, you can do about 8 to 10 with this one as well. Getting the hips back on your landing and finding a lot of control and stability. Good. This one's very important because when we land, most of our jumps in dance are going from either one leg to one leg or from 2 legs to 1. And on one leg, very often we'll land with a drop in at the knee, which puts a lot of strain on the ligaments and the structures within the knee. So finding stability is often more important to practice than how big your jump can be because the jump will come. You need to know that you can slow it down and land it. Great. So our last exercise, our 10th exercise, is going to be 3-way jumps. So we've worked on control, we've worked on core activation and activation around the hips. Now we want to put it into practice. So we're going to jump in our 3 different planes of movement. So we're going to start with our sagittal plane of a jump forward and backwards. We're going to be going that 2 to 1 that we just practiced in our snap downs, or if you did the 2 legs to 2 legs, you can do that in this jump sequence as well. So we'll start with the band again to give that cue. We'll show you a couple repetitions with 2 legs and a couple repetitions of going from 2 to 1. Good. So it's the same mechanics on her landing that she just did in her snap down, but we're getting a little bit of that power up. The distance doesn't matter. It's as far as you can control or as small as you can control. The height doesn't matter. Again, it's as much as you can control. Something you can progress as you get better. And then we'll try the sagittal plane. Good. Nice and stable landing, no wobbles in the knees. Good. So doing about 5 to 8 of these will be a good repetition for you. Good. And the next plane we'll do is our frontal plane. If you remember, that's our side-to-side motion. So with this one, we'll show you a couple repetitions of the 2 feet jumping and the 2 feet landing. Good. And then back to center. Perfect. So with this one, it's getting that equal push off on both feet and equal landing on both feet. So it doesn't go one then the other. And the progression of this would be that 2 to 1, where you're going to jump from 2 feet to 1 foot and land. Hips stay level. The tendency will to be lifting up and also getting the point where you're losing that hip hinge. So really focus on sending the hips back. Great. Again, about 5 to 8 repetitions. And now we have our last plane, which will be our transverse. So we're going to rotate. So for this one, starting with just as simple as a 90-degree turn, but the amount you rotate all depends on how stable you're feeling that day. It can be as small or as big as you feel you can control. So we'll start with just a couple repetitions of our 2 feet to 2 feet, finding a rotation. Good. Landing and coming up from the floor and landing with 2 feet at the same time, not going one then the other. Great. And then we're going to do our 2 to 1 as well. Good. This one really watching that hip hike, so keep everything level on the landing. Drive both knees into the band. Good. So those are my top 10 favorite exercises for contemporary dancers. So you have the options of using this all 10 exercises as just one conditioning program. You can kind of pick out a couple of your favorites or ones you felt were hard. You can incorporate them into a conditioning program you're already doing or into your classes or warm-ups. And if you want to check out some more dance conditioning made for you by physical therapists, go ahead and check out Sugarfoot Therapy.